be respectful and say thank you for the invitation to come and tell you my story on why climate change really affects me personally. Me, I'm from the Marshall Islands. You're already aware of the issue. You would know that we're always on the front line of not just the issue, but on the stories in news outlets here in America, like the news, like CNN, MSNBC, and all them. They paint, our face right in their story, the headline of this issue, and pretty much, I guess it's another way for them to, tell why these stories or these issues should be tackled upon, because there are people affected. But the reason why I'm here in front of you is because I would rather prefer me telling people why it's important to see the Marshall Islands, see my family who are not being heard. And me personally, if it affects my family, I would not let anyone else try to be in front of them, protecting them. I would be the one protecting them as, not just a man, but as, a person from the Marshall Islands, and also is within my culture as one of the head of the family. So 2 years ago, I've really got involved with trying to advocate on climate action. And it started off on how I've seen this issue progress, throughout the talks within the country and around the world. And I've started seeing some of my friends back home, my families back home, really stepping up and advocating about climate action back there. And it really hit me personally, because I didn't know if they knew that we cared here in the States or here from Arkansas. I didn't know if they understand that I see them. I see them telling, see them crying, I see them yelling, I see them in the streets. So I wanted to do something about them, make sure they understand that. So first thing I did, educated myself on the issue. Started tapping into resources that was already available, and organizations that are already involved in climate action. So this next presentation is going to tell you, why I'm really with this organization. And one of the best thing about organizations like the Citizen Climate Lobby, it giving me the platform to tell my stories within members of Congress. And I've gone to DC 3 times already to lobby with them, and that alone, it's enough for me. Just sitting in front of members of Congress and telling them that there's people that are already feeling the effects. Just sitting in front of them and telling them face to face, it's already a blessing. Even at least I'm doing something instead of just posting stuff online and posting comments. And so that's all I wanted to come and tell you, and you will hear more from Matt, why I really spend most of my time with this organization, Citizen Climate Lobby, and why I believe this specific bill would help save a lot of my friends and families and the future generation and so many others. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are any of the islands being now inundated during high tides routinely, or is it just some of the high water caused by storms?
Yeah, high tides have been it hasn't been unusual. We've seen it, but with climate change, it has made the rising of the high tides more and more like unusual, and even the droughts are even longer. So like the northern islands, they've been hit. Usually during the season of droughts, it's even longer. So what country don't even have the capabilities to really tackle that these issues already, but now with the extension with climate change. But yeah, I mean, I just recently came back from the islands last month, and last time I was there was 10 years ago, and I've already seen the effects of the rising waves. So the beaches me and my brothers grew up on, they're all gone. It's all rocks and corals, and some of the corals are already bleached. So
could you just expound on that a little bit? Just tell me about like what changes have taken place over what period of time from the climate?
Well, like me, on the climate, like for me personally, like I was saying, like the beaches me and my brothers grew up on, there's no sand. Like that's what I meant. Like my grandmother's house, we lived like right next to the lagoon side, and there used to be this wide beach. Me and my brothers used to go and swim like almost every day. And I know 10 years ago when I went back, I was starting to see how it was already coming up. But this past the visit, it was completely gone. So we already know how the cycle of climate change affects the rising waves. So yeah.
Your mom's house or your grandmother's house?
My grandmother's, yeah. Well, my grandmother's house is still there, but and the other thing is that right by the beach we had this seawall that would protect pretty much our backyard. But even that, the waves have come so high that it's the seawall has to constantly be built.
Any other questions?
Just one more line. What island are you from?
From the capital, Majuro.
Sorry, say again.
Majuro. Yeah,
Pronounce that.
Majuro.
Majuro, M-A-D-R.
Majuro.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the capital of Marshall Islands.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Chris, he serves as a reminder to me that there's climate change is actually happening, and there's actually people we know across the planet that are going through this. So our solution to climate change, well, this is a little bit about Arkansas Citizens Climate Lobby. This is our mission statement. We exist to create the political will for climate solutions by enabling individual breakthroughs and the exercise of personal and political power. So what's that mean? Well, it means that I've been to Washington, D.C. once. I've gone through individual breakthrough and exercise of personal power and gone to lobbying in Washington, D.C. once. Chris has been 3 times. So it's just normal, everyday people, just like the Sierra Club. We're just normal, everyday people volunteering our time for this cause. We like to thank, obviously, the Sierra Club for having us, but also for the work that you guys have done. As of the Sunday, when I pulled this up, there was 259. Let's see. There it is. 259 coal power plants shut down by the Sierra Club. So that's a pretty big deal. We're all working on the same issue. You guys are working at it from a regulation and a legal battle issue, and we're working on it through an emissions issue. There's a couple of things that we both share in common with the Sierra Club. One is reducing coal emissions, which is what you guys want to do, and that's what we want to do with our policy, is reduce coal emissions, and we can talk about how we can do that here in a second. Our policy also reduces emissions from power plants, transportation, and all other sources. I mean, I'm sure you guys want emissions reduced from all other sources too. our policy, we feel like it does that. And so we feel like we have some things in common with you guys, and it'd be nice to, I don't know, it's nice to have this energy in the community, basically. So what we know about climate change, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We know since the 50s that we've been emitting a lot of carbon emissions. And I always like to couple this graph with this graph, 1900, 1950, right here. This is the population of the planet. So as the population of the planet starts to escalate around 1950, when technology is getting better, we're saving more lives, you can see right here that our emissions start to just skyrocket. So I like these two graphs. We know that the correlation of the population on the planet has correlated with the carbon emissions that humans are putting out. This is CO2. This is NASA's graph. It's never in the past 650,000 years, CO2 has never been above 350 parts per million. Today it's 400 and something. I don't even know what the current 400 is, but it's above 400 today. So we already know that CO2 is rising. We know that we are emitting a lot of it. So we know how to solve this if we want less CO2 in the atmosphere. Let's make it more expensive. This is a free market policy, and this is what Citizens Climate Lobby focuses on, one single policy, and it's to put a price on pollution. It's to put a price on CO2 in the atmosphere, and so let the free market then pick who wins and who loses. Just make fossil fuels basically more expensive. And so right now, I'm going to go a little bit further into that policy. There's three main things that a carbon fee and dividend. We were talking earlier, and he said, so it's a carbon tax. And I was like, well, we stay away from the word tax because the government's not keeping the money. We're giving the money back to each individual personal household in the form of a monthly check through the Social Security Administration, which already delivers monthly checks. So we have the infrastructure to do this. So that's why it's called a carbon fee, and the dividend is part where the money is given back to individual households. And there's no other policy that is. I just think of it as a really elegant revenue neutral policy. It's bipartisan. But the first thing you would do is place a fee on fossil fuels at the source, which would be the mine, well, or the port. So as soon as it's getting out of the ground, it would be priced per ton. Is it $15, Robert?
Our proposal starts at $15 per ton of CO2 emissions.
And the important thing about that is that it continually goes up over years. So it signals to the marketplace that fossil fuels are going to become more expensive over the next 50 years. And you can start building renewable energy technology. You can start building things because we know fossil fuels by law are going to become more expensive over the next 50 to 100 years.
Can you tell me how you came up with that $15 figure?
It's a figure that is meant to, Citizens Climate Lobby has done some economic studies on this, and I'm not the best at at all the economy part of our study, but what I'm told is that it's a price that will not shock the market, but will introduce a price that will not leave the consumer shocked when they go to the gas pump.
It goes $10 a year.
Yeah, and then from then on, price it to go up. Is it $10 a year? Okay. So that's how they came up with that $15 a ton. Is they thought it was a price that would put a price on it, yet still not shock the market. We actually have a sort of brother-sister organization. What's the name of that organization, Robert? Do you remember?
The Climate Leadership Council.
Climate Leadership Council. It's a group of Republican, conservative, old, people that have been in politics around DC for a long time, and they actually come in at $40 a ton. They come in at a price that shocks the market. But anyway, I'm getting off track. The second main thing, so that's what we want to do, is we want to put a price on pollution, because right now the market pollution is free, and corporate the shareholders on these boards, they have they're by law incentivized to make the corporation money. So if it's cheaper and it's free to pollute, they're going to keep polluting unless we put a price on it. Return all of the revenue to households equally. We've talked about that. It would be a monthly check that comes in the form of a monthly check. Social Security Administration would handle it, and they would keep a fee based on their cost. But the money would go back to the households and not to the government. So the third thing that would happen would be there would be a border adjustment on goods imported or exported to countries without an equivalent price on carbon. What this is intended to do, if I'm making t-shirts and that costs me a lot of, my ink costs me a lot of fossil fuel costs, or whatever I'm making, maybe I'm selling beef and I have a lot of fossil fuel costs. Well, when I try to export that product to another country that doesn't have fossil fuel costs, I'm at a disadvantage because my product costs more because there's this price on carbon that I have to pay down the supply chain. Well, the border adjustment makes it to where I would get a refund for the cost of my carbon fee that I'm paying as a business, so that I'm not penalized when I'm trying to trade globally. So, and the same thing with import. So if I'm making something here and it costs more, and say somebody wants to buy something from China because it's cheaper, they don't have a carbon fee. So it would be an adjustment increasing the price of that good so that we're on an equal playing field. So, and then we already have that. That's why this is a federal policy, because we don't have, right now we have infrastructure in place to put in trades and tariffs. We have those all, presently, currently. So we have the infrastructure, the mechanical way to do this. Well, we don't have that interstate commerce. We don't have interstate trade, tariffs, and border adjustments for Arkansas to Louisiana to Texas. So that's why this policy is a federal policy, is because the infrastructure it exists at the federal level to make this a viable policy. So, and it's not just a bunch of, this organization's 10 years old. We have 300 and something odd chapters. So we kind of put this guy in here because he's on our Citizens Climate Lobby Advisory Board, and everyone in this room probably is familiar with James Hansen, and his opinion is about our policy that it's the backbone of a solution to the climate problem is a flat carbon emissions price. It must rise continually at a rate that is economically sound. The funds must be distributed back to the citizens. So we have pretty high, he's a pretty well-known climate advocate that's for our policy and actually on our advisory board. George Shultz was the Treasury Secretary was Treasury Secretary and Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan. So we've got pretty high-powered conservatives, which is really, really important because, as we know, in the real world, this is a partisan issue. We try to be bipartisan, but in the real world, this is a partisan issue. This is Democrats versus Republicans, if we're just giving straight talk. So George Shultz said, "We argue for revenue neutrality on the grounds that this tax should be exclusively for the purpose of leveling the playing field, not for financing some other government program or expanding government sector." So it's not an increase in tax, is what I would say if I was talking to a Republican, because anytime you increase taxes, there's going to be people that say, no, don't increase taxes, because it's not a tax, the government's not keeping it. So we've talked about carbon fee and dividend, but what's the name of the study that was done?
The REMI study.
The REMI study. So we commissioned a study, and we didn't know how it was going to turn out. It's an independent economic think tank type commission, and after giving them the parameters of our policy, this is what they said would happen. They said within 10 years, we could reduce the emissions of our country by 31%. That is a huge amount. And by 20 years, half. I mean, there's not a silver bullet to the climate solution problem. It's going to take agriculture, it's going to take land trust, it's going to take less concrete, it's going to take a lot of things. But this is one thing that we could do that we think could reduce half of our emissions within 20 years with no government regulation. Free market idea. No government regulation is a part of this. Just let the market decide. So we're really proud of this milestone goal. I mean, this is the point of our policy, right? So jobs created, 2.1 million jobs after 10 years, and after 20 years, 2.8 million new jobs. Now, the logic behind how this creates jobs has to do with people are getting a stimulus, people are getting a check every month from the carbon fee. So in economics, apparently that causes the economy to grow because people are getting like stimulus money, which creates jobs. That's the logic behind the job issue, the job creation part.
You're giving the money to people who will spend it.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. So the lives, the 227,000 lives saved over 20 years, that's pretty easy to understand. I mean, we've got coal pollution, we've got to have electricity. This is all, well, we're working on this not being coal, right? We've just heard about that. But the air would be cleaner, and we would have a healthier population with half of our emissions in 20 years. So the household dividend, oh, restart required. No, we're not going to restart now. Okay. So what, in about 10 years, for a family of 4, the household dividend would be $288 a month. That's not small money. But, you know, they do have to recover the price from going to the gas pump and paying higher fuel prices. Because it's going to affect the gas prices. It's going to affect a lot of prices. And the companies are going to pay that price when they pull it out of the ground or the well. But you know who they're going to pass that price on to? The consumers. They're not going to take the hit. They're just going to make the price of goods go up. So that's why we're so passionate about the government not keeping this money and this money going back to the people who are going to pay the price. So they're going to have higher fuel costs, but they're going to get $288 a month every month from the Social Security Administration. After 20 years, $396 a month. That's kind of counterintuitive, because you would think that after 20 years there would be less emissions and less carbon, and it would go down, not up. But anyway, we'll have to figure that out, Robert. Why?
The price of carbon pollution is going up.
Oh, that is right. That's right. The price is continually going up. So even though emissions are reducing, we're constantly increasing the price of those emissions. So under the
20 years, the price will be over $200 a ton.
And that's what we want. Price it out of the market. Go ahead.
So, interesting. All right, so
that's what we like to hear.
the question is it going to reduce the emissions?
We plan that it will reduce emissions by half over 20 years.
But that's just a guesstimate, because people have been known in this country to just keep paying the price of whatever it is. When gas is $3 a gallon, they pay it. So that's why I'm wondering if you have any stats to show that it's actually going to reduce the emissions.
Well, they paid an independent economy. Go ahead, Robert.
Can I? Yes.
Yeah.
There's been a number of independent economic analysis done, and all of the RIMI reports, they weren't looking at climate-related things. They were just looking at the economics,
right, plus
the carbon dioxide. And through their modeling, when the price starts to go up, people are going to start using, especially corporations. And also, we know it works because there's over 30 countries that have put a price on carbon.
Right.
In British Columbia is the one that has the truest model, just like this one.
Right.
And their emissions have gone down, in fact, more than they thought. And it's been in effect now for almost 10 years. And they're just now going to reauthorize it. And a vast majority of British Columbians are in favor of it. So, yeah, it's not just a bunch of guesswork, and that's why we are so proud of this, because it is independent, economically based. And not only studies for the nation, but studies for California, Washington State, Oregon, Massachusetts, and I'm proud to say that we have done one for Arkansas as well. And in Arkansas, the results are pretty good. And this is the kind of thing we tell our congressmen about, you know. They always say they want to create jobs, grow the economy. They say, well, this will do that.
Go ahead, Tom.
My other thought is that the emissions will go down as prices go up, particularly now, because there are viable alternatives for replacing fossil fuels, at least in the heating, air conditioning, and automobile section markets, which are the vast majority of the uses.
Well, this is the other beauty, because although we don't pick winners or losers, this money and this price on carbon further stimulates renewable development, because people are not going to want to pay that high price. and they're going to look for alternatives. And
Well, I'm those weird people that keep track of commodity prices, but the price per kilowatt for renewables now is just plummeting.
Yeah.
Economies of scale and expansion of the network and the facilities, and it's well, actually it beats coal right now.
yeah, the coals.
And
think about if by law over the next 50 to 100 years, the price of fossil fuel,
Yeah.
coal, was going to be going up. Think about the investment in renewable energy, renewable technology that signals to the market. Sure, go ahead.
I'm real big on terminology here, so you may need to educate me here, and that is, I keep hearing these words, clean coal.
Yeah,
You need to
I don't,
educate me because I was assuming that means,
I don't know that there's any school I could have ever gone to that would educate me on to what clean coal is, because I don't think it's real.
ain't no such thing.
There's no such thing.
The only, honest to God, it is a term that they market tested, that it would make people think that there is some program out there that makes coal cleaner. The only way you can make coal cleaner is to, whatever comes out of the smokestack, you stick it right back in the ground. And I think Donald Trump, if I remember correctly, he thought clean coal meant you wash the coal before you burn it or something.
Yeah.
I thought he intentionally did it just to make me personally mad. Is what I thought he came up with that word for.
Yeah, there has been quite a bit of government money put into the clean coal program, but all they have come up with is more efficient ways to burn the coal. Not that they're actually reducing the pollution from it.
okay.
And that's the problem. They keep pumping money into it, and that has been the solution they come up with is
Burn it more efficiently.
Yeah, and then take whatever's out of the smokestack and stick it right back, into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But power plants are stationary, and there's only so much you can stick in the ground.
Yeah.